Mr. Paxton argues that the articles do not allege impeachable conduct because they do not allege that he committed a crime. We do allege that he committed crimes.
Today was the first day of the Ken Paxton impeachment trial. We'll hear from 25 News anchor Todd Unger and reporter Dominique Lay, who are live at the state capitol. And we have a Baylor expert here to talk about the big takeaways from day one of that impeachment trial.
Proceeding with this illegal impeachment scheme to overturn a decision, the corrupt politicians in the Texas House are demonstrating that blind loyalty to Speaker Dade Phelan is more important than upholding their oath of office.
But we hope and pray that this will be a process that allows the public to fully examine everything.
Now, there are dozens of witnesses that could testify during the next few weeks. The trial could last until the end of the month.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. I'm Lauren Adams. Todd Unger is in Austin tonight. Suspended Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton is up against 30 senators as the impeachment trial got underway today. Part of what spurred that Paxton impeachment trial, Paxton's attempt to settle with 4 whistleblowers out of court with an apology and a $3.3 million payout. Paxton asked for that money to come out of state funds to settle with the whistleblowers, sparking an investigation by a House committee. Looking at how the trial will play out, the prosecution gets 24 hours total to make their case, and the defense has another 24 to make theirs. This is followed by 1 hour rebuttal from both. Closing statements follow, then a vote. The Senate is considering 16 articles of 20 against Paxton. 21 senators of 30 have to vote yes to impeach Paxton. And we have been at the Texas state capitol all day long, tracking the trial minute by minute. Already had a few twists and turns. 25 News anchor Todd Unger is live there now. He's been in court watching those proceedings since early this morning. Todd, what's the latest from today?
Lauren, just a historic Tuesday down here at the state capitol. As you mentioned, things getting underway this morning right after 9 o'clock, and then it was a series of pretrial motions. I want to go over that because that dominated a lot of what we saw this morning. There was about 20 of these pretrial motions, maybe even a few more put forward by Paxton's defense team. Essentially, they were trying to stop a lot of these articles of impeachment or even the proceedings in general from getting going. That did not happen. I can tell you that senators, the jurors in this case, rejected every single motion, basically saying the allegations of public mistrust, of bribery, of other charges deserve to be heard. Lieutenant Governor Patrick did rule favorably for Paxton on one element, saying he could not be forced to testify. Once some housekeeping rules were taken care of, there was a quick lunch, and then those long-anticipated opening statements.
The House didn't bother to vet this foolishness. And now they've put it right in your lap for you to do the work that they failed to do. This impeachment was the perfect marriage of a group of representatives fueled by a powerful lobbyist and led by a drunken speaker.
As the Texas Supreme Court made clear regarding the impeachment of Governor Ferguson 106 years ago, wrongs justifying impeachment don't have to be crimes.
So as you would imagine, a lot of back and forth. Then the first witness was called late this afternoon. He is the former number 2 in the AG's office and a Paxton whistleblower. We'll have more on that in a moment. As for the rules of the trial, Lauren, you mentioned this briefly. Testimony will be heard in 90-minute chunks with 20-minute breaks. They'll try to go until 6 p.m. every night, although they did stop at 5 this evening. Each side had an hour for openings. They'll have 24 hours for their witnesses or to do cross-examinations, then a rebuttal, and then a closing. The trial could easily stretch into the end of next week or even the week after, so it is not going to be quick. One thing you might have missed down here if you're watching online, if you're watching on Twitter or on Facebook, there weren't a lot of protests. There weren't a lot of demonstrations. We really were expecting a lot of that. 25 News reporter Dominique Lay has been outside on the Capitol grounds all day long tracking that. Dominique?
It's a busy day here at the Capitol, but I did speak with some people who were leaving the trial who told me they were shocked to see the lack of attendance from the public inside the Senate chambers. It's also a really quiet day here on the outside of the Capitol. There have been no signs of protests like we've seen in the past for other major Texas issues, but the people who are here have a lot to say. Natalie Ebay was one of the first inside, ready to support Attorney General Ken Paxton. She expressed her disappointment with the Republicans in the Senate who are voting against Paxton. She says her senator voted for the trial, and with that vote, she doesn't feel represented. Ebay says she will keep fighting until change is made.
It's not my future that depends on it. It's the future of the 30s and the 20s. They're the ones whose lives are at stake, and their children. And I don't want them to become slaves of some one world governance that doesn't care who we are as a people or what we want.
I don't wonder why. It disappoints me that it took this long to get to this point when this man has clearly done so many questionable things.
Tozier came this morning thinking there would be protests and was shocked when no one had any signs in hand. Now, we're hearing that the trial could last between 2 to 3 weeks, and it's possible that when the trial continues, we could begin to see more protesters or more supporters. At the Capitol, Dominique Lay, 25 News.
Dominique, thank you. Live tonight outside of the Capitol. One other final note I want to make. A lot of people who were tuning in this afternoon, they might have asked yourself, where is suspended AG Ken Paxton? Because he was not on the Senate floor. Well, technically, by the rules set forth by the Senate, he only had to be here for the 9 a.m. proceeding, so he was here for the morning session. He then was allowed to leave. No word yet on whether he will be in court tomorrow. Lauren, we'll go ahead and send it back to you in the studio.
All right, Todd, and we have an expert in studio who's going to talk on that coming up in just a moment. Well, Nate Paul, that's a name that you're going to hear a lot of. He is the Austin-based real estate investor who has been charged with 8 counts of making false statements to financial institutions. He's central to the allegations against Paxton. Paul allegedly pulled strings of the AG's office and directed them to investigate his enemies. Documents show that Paxton hired an outside attorney named Brandon Kamek, who served special prosecutor to investigate and subpoena Paul's enemies. Now, records show that Paul wrote the subpoenas word for word. Paxton also used an Uber account with a fake name to meet Paul and a mistress. And from the Texas Tribune, part of the impeachment trial will center around Paxton's infidelity. Now, it's not clear exactly when Paxton's affair began, but told his staff in September of 2018 that it was ending and he was going to focus on his marriage. Paxton said that did not happen. The mistress, known as Laura Olson, worked for Texas Senator Donna Campbell from April 2014 to 2019. Now, she was later employed by Nate Paul, Paxton's friend, who is in federal custody. So a lot of details there. And here is Paxton's wife, Angela, senator herself. She was there in red this morning supporting her husband, as other supporters there in the gallery wore red to show their solidarity as well. Now, his wife, is not allowed to vote. Now, Brian Birdwell, who represents Texas District 22, is heading up the Rules Committee for the impeachment trial. The Texas Tribune described him as an ally of the Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, but he's previously endorsed Ken Paxton in past AG campaigns. And Pete Flores, another of our local state representatives, is on that same Rules Committee. He doesn't appear to have an extensive history with Paxton. Texas Senator Charles Schwartner doesn't have a direct connection to the suspended AG, but he did support former Land Commissioner George P. Bush in his run last election against Paxton. And Ken Paxton will face a security fraud case after this impeachment trial is over. Paxton faces 2 counts of securities fraud, a first-degree felony with up to 99 years behind bars. It stems from allegations that he solicited investors and Servergy Incorporated back in 2011. Prosecutors claim a company paid him to promote its stock, but he did not report that to the Texas Ethics Commission. Paxton also faces 1 count of failing to register with state security regulators, a 3rd-degree felony. And there is a lot to unpack here, so we brought in Patrick Flavin, a Baylor political science professor and a Texas legislator expert, to talk about all of this. Patrick, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
First of all, your thoughts on the trial today?
A lot happened in this first day of the pretrial motions. I think the biggest event today was 22 senators voting not to dismiss the charges prior to the previous election. The reason that's important is it takes 21 senators to convict, and that strongly suggests that there are 22 senators that may be open to convicting AG Paxton.
So you think it could possibly happen?
I think it's very possible after what we've seen today.
All right. And Paxton, what do you think about him not having to testify?
It certainly draws the distinctions between a civil or a criminal trial and a political trial. So this is a very much a political trial. In a criminal trial, Paxton wouldn't have to testify; it'd be up to him. In a political trial, the Senate gets to write the rules, and so that means that Lieutenant Governor gets to decide on a question like that. And he ruled favorably for Paxton today by ruling that he didn't have to testify if he doesn't want to. And it seems like the sure bet is he probably won't testify.
Right, and he did not even show up this afternoon. What do you think about that?
That's another difference, a political versus a criminal trial. In a criminal trial, you expect the defendant to be sitting there for the duration of the trial. It certainly seems to be the case that if this trial takes 2 to 3 weeks, it may be that Paxton isn't there for some or even most of the time.
Yeah, and a lot of interest in this, not just here locally in Central Texas, but all of Texas and, of course, the entire nation. You know, this hasn't happened in over 100 years. It happened to the governor, James Ferguson, back in 1917, and he was ultimately dismissed from office. How do you think this could impact our politics here in Texas?
Yeah, I think there are parallels between Ken Paxton and former President Trump. So just this morning, former President Trump tweeted out support for Ken Paxton. And this is certainly a story that's getting national news. Every national news outlet that I looked at today had a story, right near the top about these proceedings. And so this could be sort of a test case, I suppose, here in Texas to see whether claiming that the prosecution is political, that it's a sham, whether that holds any weight when it comes down to senators actually deciding his future political fate.
Yes, and some of the people who are going to be voting are not going to be in office next year. So how political does this get?
Yeah, it's very much a political process. The senators are jurors, but not jurors like in a criminal trial. So they're going to have to base their decisions, their votes, not only on what they think is right, but also with an eye towards what their constituents think and want them to do. And there's all sorts of political pressure being exerted from different groups around the state, vowing to, if they were to convict Paxton, to vote them out of office next time or to fund a primary challenger. So lurking behind all this are very much political considerations for the senators.
And it's very interesting, too, because you have lawyers that are talking and testifying against lawyers who are on the stand. And even at the very end of the trial today, you saw that they had to go in and talk about it. It ultimately ended a little bit early because they have to talk about some of the evidence that's going to be submitted. Do you think that's going to play out throughout the entire trial?
Yes, there's no shortage, to be sure, of lawyers down at Austin right now, and it will be sort of interesting to see as this plays out, sort of how Lieutenant Governor Patrick, how he serves as essentially the judge, right, ruling on what evidence can be admitted and not. Already making the major ruling today that Paxton doesn't have to testify. So he's definitely the person in charge, and I think the person to keep, to pay the most attention to as this process plays out.
And were you surprised by the lack of support from the public today? Not many protesters outside the Capitol.
It was surprising. I just having been out in Austin during the legislative session, seems like there's always protesters about one issue or another. So my expectation was that this would bring out protesters both for and against, and it seems like that wasn't the case.
Not at all. Okay, Patrick, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll definitely check back with you as this trial goes further.